Thank you, guys. You all sound amazing. It's so great to worship with you together this evening. And it is a really exciting thing for me to be able to sort of kick off this evening and just say a few words of introduction and provide a bit of context for this evening. It's exciting because this is the first time we've done Equip. We would like to do some more of these. But the thing that really excites me is that for this first one, it just feels so apt and so important that we focus on mentoring. I want to start, if I may, with a very short exercise. So could I just invite you to close your eyes for a moment? Now I want you to think of somebody who has really helped you in your faith. Someone who's taken the time to listen, to encourage you, maybe even to challenge you. Now, with that person in your mind, I want you to think of a time when you really, really needed that person. And how did that feel? And I want you to try and imagine how it might have felt without that person. You can open your eyes again. Thank you for taking the time to do that. It's powerful stuff, isn't it, when you think about that? And I'm pretty confident, looking out here this evening, I'm pretty confident that everybody here is fulfilling that role for somebody else, whether you think it or not. And so the purpose of tonight is really to inspire and equip us to do more of that and to do that better. Now, it feels to me like we're on a bit of a journey with mentoring within the Stewards Trust. Mentoring is already happening within the Stewards Trust, so the journey has begun, and we want to invite you this evening to join us on that journey. Like any journey, it's really important to start well, to know where you're starting from. And I think we have such an amazing starting point. We're in this privileged and unique position where we have this multi-generational community. Just take a look around this evening. Take a look around at the age range of people here. The youth have all congregated at the back. But it's fantastic. We've got this you're now saying, oh, hi, you're here. Hi, how are you doing? We've got this amazing multi-generational community, and we run multi-generational events. And when I say unique and privileged position, so these events provide such an amazing opportunity for mentoring relationships to form and to grow, to form in a very sort of healthy, natural, organic way. So that's the good news. Now for my confession for the evening. I've invited you to come on a journey with us, but I have to tell you the map is incomplete. And what I mean by that is just to say that we don't have all the answers tonight for you when it comes to mentoring. We're not able to send you home with a how-to guide. We're going to have to navigate this journey together. But the great news is we've got some amazing guides who are really familiar with the territory. They've trodden this path before. And they're going to help us move more quickly and more safely as a result of that. However, you know the Stewards Trust better than anybody else. So what we need from you tonight is to help us flesh out what mentoring means within the context of the Stewards Trust, what it means for this community. And so there's going to be an opportunity tonight for you to participate, for you to contribute to this map, if you like, as we try and complete this map. Just before I hand over to Annie, there's a fundamental question that we need to ask right at the beginning, and that is, why go on this journey anyway? Why should the Stewards Trust be involved in mentoring? Now, about 18 months ago, many of you may have gathered for a similar evening to this, where we outlined the vision for the Stewards Trust. And on that evening, I introduced you to a gentleman called Monsieur Mangetout. Some of you may remember him. He is a gentleman who ate an entire aeroplane by himself. Quite ridiculous, and he lived. He did it by having a strategy of just taking it one bite at a time. It's not a gag, he actually did it. And I, on that evening, sort of compared our sort of vision, if you like, with Monsieur Mongetu's one bite at a time strategy. Our vision is to transform the world through discipleship, not one bite at a time, but one person at a time. And when I think of mentoring, I just think that is the best way to do discipleship, one person at a time. So if we're serious about discipleship, I feel we have to be serious about mentoring. And let's remember, Jesus didn't do discipleship in the classroom. Jesus made disciples by sharing his life, by journeying with people. So although we don't have this roadmap for you to take away, this how-to guide for you to take away, the exciting thing is that we're going to start tonight to write that together. Tonight is step one.
There was a man who was convinced his wife was deaf. So he went to the doctor and he said to the doctor, "Doctor, I think my wife is deaf. What can we do about it?" And the doctor said, "Well, let's test whether she is deaf or not." So while she was in the kitchen cooking dinner, he went up into the bedroom and shouted out, "What's for dinner?" No reply. He walked out onto the landing and shouted out, "What's for dinner?" No reply. He went down to the hall by the front door and said, "What's for dinner?" No reply. He went to the kitchen door and said, "What's for dinner?" No reply. He went right up to her ear as she was cooking the dinner and said, "What's for dinner?" And she said, for the 5th time, "Chicken." If you didn't get that, there's no hope for the next 20 minutes. But it's a pretty important mentoring story. And here's another important mentoring story. I just want to read a bit from Jesus, from Mark chapter 3. Mark 3, verse 13. Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12, designating them apostles, that they might be with him and he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. These are the 12 he appointed: Simon, who he gave the name Peter, James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John. To them he gave the name Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. I just want to share some thoughts, simple thoughts, on the power of mentoring, not least because I've had very powerful mentors mentoring me. I was 45 years old in a lecture hall in Canada at Regent College, listening to a guy called Eugene Peterson. And listening to him, the first lecture was incredibly disappointing and boring, but it picked up from there. And I felt God say to me in that lecture hall, you are meant to be something like this man 20 years from now. And then I met another man in the same college, a guy called Jim Houston, who has probably got 3 brains, but manages to contain them in one head. And I spent some time with him, and I found out he was exactly 30 years older than me. And I lost my father when I was 7 years old. And at the age of 45, 46, God was placing in front of me 2 men, one man 20 years ahead of me, one man 30 years ahead of me, both still alive and kicking quite a lot, particularly Jim Houston. Both of these guys hugely influential in my own life. So what is mentoring? A quote, which is coming up on the screen right now. This is a secular quote. Mentoring is essentially a learning relationship between two people. It requires trust, commitment, emotional engagement. It involves listening, challenge, and support. And some of the key words of mentoring are in that quote. And there are many other quotes and definitions around mentoring. Trust, commitment, emotional agreement, listening, challenge, support. All of those things mark out a healthy mentoring relationship. And yet when you look at Jesus and what he did, he had to work with some material in the disciples that was in its own way quite eccentric. What did Jesus have to deal with in Mark 3? Well, he has 4 fishermen, 1 hated tax collector, a member of a radical and hated political party, all of them laymen, no religious expert in sight, no experts in scripture as far as we are aware. As far as we are aware, none of them chosen for their communication gifts. And as far as we know, none with money or business skill that could be classified as successful. And Jesus starts to work with this material, with these broken men, all with their eccentricities, all with their particular likes and dislikes, all with their particular passions. And he takes them on a journey. He literally takes them on a journey. He walks with them. He takes them out and leads them into their future. And there's 4 things I just want to describe from that particular journey. And the first one is follow. One of the characteristics of a healthy mentoring relationship is both the mentor and the mentee learn how to follow. You really can't have a successful church without people following, and you can't have a successful mentoring relationship unless both the mentee and the mentor know what it means to follow. And following can be a tricky business, but it's a crucial business in our own personal development. If you're going to be able to follow, it means you have to pay attention. If you're going to follow, it means you have to watch someone's movement. If you're going to follow someone. If you're going to follow, it means you have to trust. Many years ago, I used to play basketball. And there's a time in basketball when you lose the ball and you have to play a different sort of defense where you play man-to-man marking. And the idea with man-to-man marking is to make sure that your opposition does not get the ball. So you don't pay attention to the ball, you pay attention to the man. And you run after the man. And just try and make sure that he doesn't get that ball. And my coach called me over. And he said to me, Viv, you're doing this all wrong. And I said, what am I doing wrong? He said, you're watching the guy's shoulders when you should be watching his hips. Because a man will always go in the direction of his hips. This changed my basketball life. Because now I had to become an expert in watching the groin of another man as we raced around this court. But I had to pay attention. And if you're going to be able to mentor well, you will need to be an excellent follower. You will need to be a follower of Jesus Christ, paying attention to others who are around you. You'll need to be able to trust, develop relationships of trust. You will need to be able to sort of watch each other's hips and see which direction someone goes in. Second thing that's critical, I think, in a mentoring relationship is designation. Jesus takes these guys and he takes them up a mountain And he starts to give them a sense of identity. He starts to give them a name. He starts to designate them. Now, I cannot begin to tell you the pain, well, not all pain, but in the first few years, the pain of being called Vivian and being male. It's been a very complex journey. I was once booked into a women's ward for an operation. I had a mustache at the time. It worked out really well. They gave me a private ward. But I've lived with the name Vivian. That's my name. I've been designated that way. And there is some difference between your name and your designation. But Jesus takes these guys up a mountain and he designates them. He says to them, you are now apostles. You are now apostles. And some of them, he actually changes their name. And that's key for them to develop into what they're intended to be. And one of the roots, I think, of really healthy mentoring relationships is this process. That somehow in a mentoring relationship, you start to discover, this is my designation. This is what I'm meant to be. Through this relationship with somebody else, I'm learning, this is my true name. This is my call. This is now my quest. And one of the most exciting things that happens in a mentoring relationship is when you see somebody growing in understanding their own designation. That now I am evangelist. And now I am workplace changer. Now I am whatever it may be. And you discover in this mentoring relationship your true and rich identity. It's one of the most powerful things that happens. And you'll be aware that in Scripture there's lots of name changing that goes on. C.S. Lewis does quite a bit of it too in Narnia. And it's to do with designation. And it's one of the subtleties of the mentoring process, but one of the most beautiful things. The third thing after follow and designation is embrace. What Jesus does with these disciples is he takes them up into a mountain and he leads them through a process that I want to call embrace. Now, Luke, come up here, please. I want to give you a hug. Watch this carefully. Thank you, Luke. Round of applause for Luke, please. He had no idea that was going to happen. That was an embrace. It looks very simple, but it's actually quite subtle. There's a theologian called Miroslav Volf, and he's divided an embrace, as theologians do, into 4 separate parts. And the first part is the invitation. Is when I say to Luke, Luke, give me a hug. It's a dangerous place. Because he may look at me and go, you must be joking. Thank God he didn't do that. And then there's a moment's hesitation where you both put your arms out and you wait. You wait for the embrace to begin. You wait to see whether this is actually going to happen. And then you actually hug. And in that moment of hug, the one sort of becomes 2 and the 2 become 1. In that moment, you are embraced together. You are together. You are sort of 1. And then there is the moment of release when you let each other go. How long do you think we held on for? Any guesses? 1.5 seconds. 5 seconds. My guesses were a bit nearer 1.5 and 5. But I'm not quite sure. Because one of the key things in embrace is the process of letting go. And Jesus takes these disciples up on a mountainside, and he is embracing them. They're going to be with him for quite a while. They're going to spend time together. They're going to share their lives together. They're going to know Jesus and each other quite a lot. And it's all in this context of embrace. And I want to suggest to you, as a model for mentoring, as an image that may help, along with many other images, that image of embrace can be really helpful. But I just want to point out the critical issue of letting go. Because if we'd have held on probably for 5 seconds, that would be all right, yeah? How would it have felt if we'd held on for 10 seconds? How would that have been? How would it have been if it had been 30 seconds? Would you have been a little bit nervous? 2 minutes? You'd have gone and joined the Jehovah's Witnesses or something, I don't know. You'd have left. Because the key in an embrace is the letting go. Is being able to set someone free. And great mentoring relationships have got this image of embrace. We are together. We are sharing in a place of love and a mutual appreciation. But we know how to let go. And occasionally you will find mentoring relationships go toxic because that doesn't happen. Because the person who is the mentor needs the mentee to fill some gap in them, and they will not let them go. You often see this in a church leadership relationship with their people. Please stay with me, I need you. But the key to a healthy relationship is letting go. So follow, being in a place of embrace, receiving your identity, and lastly, sent. What Jesus does with these disciples is he sends them. He actually ends the relationship in one form. In one sense, the relationship continues on and on, as it continues in us in the church. But he sends them out. The whole purpose of this relationship is that they may be sent, that they may be gone, that the relationship may change, that they won't hang around for a long time in this sort of embrace part, but they know what it means to move on. And I think that's an important part of the mentoring relationship, that the relationship in mentoring is not just about me feeling good about you and us enjoying each other's relationship, which is great, it's wonderful. But it has to it this sense of being able to move out into the world. And they now have to take on the world. They have to take on demonic forces. They have to take on establishing the church. They are now in the middle of this huge task that's in front of them. They are now sent. And I think healthy mentoring relationships always have that element about them, that this is not just about us. This is about the world. Now, I've been mentoring certain people for many years, so they don't all come to an end in 3 months. Some people I spend time with, it would be a month or 6 weeks. I'll meet somebody next week, and we're into probably our 15th year, and it's changed, but it's all in the process of being able to be sent. So, for the 5th time, chicken. Amen.